class is about not setting goals, but on commitments. Meaning, a goal is only as good as how bad you're committed to seeing it through to the end. So, if you set a goal for yourself, and the first time it gets hard, or doesn't go the way you expected it to do, or you have a tough time, you say, screw it. It's not a real goal, because you're not committed to seeing that through to the end. In order to really follow through something all the way, you have to have commitment. So first of all, what does it mean, commitment? I'll tell you guys the first time that, in my life, that I experienced what commitment was. It was in high school when I had my first quote-unquote girlfriend, serious. I didn't know what commitment meant, but I knew it in high school what people did when they wanted to commit to something between a guy and a girl. The guy gave the girl what was called as a promise ring. You ever hear this before? It's not an engagement ring because you're not getting married, but it's like a promise ring that you'll be mine and I'll be yours. You know what I mean? Like we're like steady now.
For now.
Yeah. We're an item. That means once the girl has a promise ring, that she's officially with this guy. So I remember the first time I had a commitment with a girl, and like we were then going steady. And for me, it was a real commitment for at least 2-3 weeks. And then along came someone else that seemed like I wanted to have a commitment to. And the point is that that word commitment wasn't really what I thought it was. Because I wasn't really committed to seeing through my relationship with that girl. Because if I was, I would have saw it through and I wouldn't have stopped it. But what happened? The first time that something else came along, whether it was an obstacle or a different desire, whatever it may be, the commitment ended. And so did the relationship. And I tell you guys, the first time after that, I really thought I figured out what commitment was. I've gone through these levels in my life where, as anything in life, the longer you live, the more experiences you have, the more you learn from things you're doing. So I realized that you can't really, at the time, I thought you couldn't really have a commitment with a member of the opposite sex. It wasn't a real commitment. I come from a divorced household. My parents got divorced. So to me, what was a commitment of marriage? It means you stay together until things get really tough, and then you say, screw it. So that wasn't really commitment. I didn't really have a basis for what that word meant. I've heard it thrown around a lot, but I never really experienced it. And then I met Vlad. Vlad was a friend of mine that I met probably in my late 20s, who was connected to the Russian mafia, and he lived in South Beach, and he was in the exotic car and boat business. He was a broker for high-end cars, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, involved in selling high-end autos and boats with very high-priced ticket items. And I had a very high level of respect for him because he showed me what commitment meant. He was committed to something that you don't leave, partly because of loyalty and partly because of fear. Because once you're in, there's no going out. And once you're privy to being inside that inside world, and you know who's involved in what arenas and what things, they don't let you just quit. It's not like a job. You know what? This isn't for me anymore. You stay in until you die. And I just respected that. You know, there's something, I don't know why, there's like a high level of respect, especially for like gangsters in our country. It's like, because they have a code. They have a code that they stick by. To them, it's like a family. And that code, he never separated from. It wasn't until years later that I really found out what was behind his business and what he was really doing, when I realized that there was nothing to admire. Yeah, making real money, and they found him dead, execution style, dismembered. But the first time that I personally experienced commitment in my life, and where I really felt like in my kishkas that it was commitment, was when I found Hashem, and I found the Torah. And it's interesting, because everyone has their moments of where like they connect. And I don't mean connect like when I first started doing tshuva and I felt like the wonderful feeling of being connected to Hashem in that way. But I mean connecting in the sense that I felt like there's no going back. Like from this point, nothing's going to separate this commitment. And it came when I was tested. Because ultimately, in order for us to achieve our life in getting closer to Hashem, or for the most part, anything else, any type of goal we set ourselves to, the way we really know we're committed is when we get tested. When we get tested and we continue to go on that path and we overcome the difficult test, because it's always difficult, that's when we know we're really moving in the right direction. And my test, everyone has their own test. My test, it didn't come in a way of Shabbat, because at that point I was so thrilled with keeping Shabbat that I had a day that was so meaningful in my life. It didn't come with eating non-kosher food, because I spent my whole life dining on 8-pound lobsters and filet mignon. It was like food was not a big deal to me anymore. But it came from a chick. I was in Israel for a couple months, and I was with a group of people. I wouldn't say I was from, but I was like, I was covering my head with a baseball hat, and I had tzitzis on, I was tucking them in. But I knew I wanted to go on the path. And I was talking to a group of people about going to Masada. And there happened to be a girl present, and I was saying, yeah, I'm really going to go. I'm going to get up early in the morning. I'm going to, I rented a car. I'm going to camp out, And she's like, I want to go. I was like, okay, and I didn't really pay attention to it, and I kept talking. And then she said again, well, I'd really like to go. I was like, yeah, it's going to be a cool thing, whatever, and I blew it off. And then the group broke up, and she came up to me, and she gave me a tap on the shoulder, and she's like, no, I really want to go with you. And there's a little sparkle in her eye. And at that moment, I don't know why, but I felt like I got a decision to make. Because I had learned enough Torah at that point to know that the only way that relationships are really meaningful between members of the opposite sex is when you bring God into the relationship, and when you make a commitment through marriage to have not only as your partner you're committed to, but as God you're committed to in your marriage. And outside of that, it's emptiness. And I realized that your marriage or relationship with your spouse is an example of the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And if one member of the relationship is cheating on the other one, it's like a Jew cheating on Hashem. Meaning, we're no longer seeking pleasure from God, we're seeking it from other gods. Whether that comes in the form of money, whether it comes in the form of whatever it is that we're doing, that we're going outside of the path that God had made for us. And I realized at that point in my life that that's nothing I wanted to do. And I passed the test, Baruch Hashem. And after I did, I felt so good inside. Not out of pride, but I knew that I was following through on my commitment. I knew at that point that I really had a purpose. At that point in my life, stronger than any purpose I had before, that I was going to see through to the end. And just as to mention, there was 2 other times in my life since I found Hashem in the Torah that I've really felt what it means for commitment. And the next was when I found the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I took upon myself to be a Chabad Chassid and to do everything in my power to fulfill that job. And the third is when I got married, when I met my wife, and I realized that that's a relationship, that's something that's very important to me, that I don't want to see jeopardized.